At dawn, our HOA president drove her Mercedes through my 8-year-old Snowman like it was a target. She didn't stop. She didn't apologize. She didn't realize the ground beneath that Snowman wasn't just packed snow, it was the end of her rule. If you like stories where bullies meet consequences and families take their peace back, subscribe, because the truth hits harder when it's documented. Marcus Kellerman had moved into Willowbrook Estates with one goal: stability. The divorce had taken most of what felt predictable in his life. The house took the rest of his savings. The only thing he refused to gamble was his daughter's sense of safety. Zoe was 8, small enough to still believe that winter could fix anything. Snow meant new beginnings, clean streets, quiet mornings, and the kind of simple joy that didn't ask hard questions about court schedules or missing parents at school events. She built snowmen the way other kids built friendships, carefully, proudly, like the world would be kinder if she shaped it with her hands. The neighborhood looked perfect on paper. Trimmed lawns. Matching mailboxes. The kind of place where community was printed on flyers like it was guaranteed. Marcus discovered fast that in Willowbrook, community was a word Brenda Thornfield used like a lock. Brenda was the HOA president and the face of every rule that had ever been written by someone who didn't have to work late. She carried a clipboard like an extension of her arm. She measured things that didn't matter. She punished things that did. The first week, Marcus received a fine because his trash bin stayed visible too long. The second week, Zoe's wreath became a violation because the colors weren't approved. The third week, Zoe's chalk drawings on their own driveway became temporary ground decorations, with a removal deadline that turned childhood into a schedule. Zoe's joy started shrinking to the size of what was allowed. Marcus tried to stay calm. He was an electrical contractor, and contractors survived by not burning bridges they might later need. He paid the first fine because it felt like the quickest way to protect peace. He paid the second because Zoe asked him to, because she didn't want anyone mad at them. He paid the third because the neighborhood's quiet pressure made him feel like he was the problem for noticing the cruelty. Then winter came, and Zoe found snow. The first snowman was a family: 2 parents, 2 kids, a snow dog with stick legs and buttons for Marcus's old work shirts. She tied her purple scarf around one snowman's neck like it was the most valuable thing she owned. She begged a carrot from a neighbor and treated it like a trophy. The next morning, a violation notice waited on Marcus's windshield. The fine was smaller than the insult. It wasn't the money. It was the message. Zoe's happiness didn't count as standard. Marcus removed the snowman before the deadline. He did it gently, even though the idea felt wrong. Zoe watched with that quiet confusion kids get when adults destroy something, because rules. She rebuilt in a different corner. Brenda found it anyway. The second time, Marcus saw it from the kitchen window. The silver Mercedes rolled too close, then swerved like the driver wanted to feel the impact. The snowman exploded outward. Zoe's scarf slid across the driveway like it had been thrown. Brenda did not get out. She did not look sorry. She rolled down her window just long enough to let Marcus know she was pleased with herself. Zoe cried in a way that made Marcus feel like his chest had a crack in it. The third time, it wasn't even about the snowman. It was about control. Brenda drove through a small snow figure hidden behind the shed as if she'd taken the detour just to prove there was nowhere Zoe could create something without permission. That night, Zoe asked the question Marcus couldn't answer with patience anymore. Why did the mean lady keep killing her snow friends? Marcus didn't tell Zoe what he wanted to say. He didn't tell her that some adults used rules to cover what they really enjoyed: power, fear, and being untouchable. He just promised her that she wasn't wrong for making something beautiful. After Zoe fell asleep, Marcus opened his laptop and began doing what he did on job sites: documenting and diagnosing. He pulled up the HOA documents, the management company's name, and every public record he could find. He followed the money first, because money always explained behavior that morality couldn't. Pinnacle Property Solutions managed Willowbrook's HOA. It sounded neutral until Marcus dug deeper. Pinnacle wasn't just a vendor. Pinnacle was connected. Brenda's husband, Derek Thornfield, wasn't just involved. His stake in the management company meant every fine helped the Thornfields twice: authority for Brenda, profit for Derek. It wasn't enforcement. It was a machine. Marcus printed screenshots. He saved filings. He created folders labeled by date, because dates mattered. He did what bullies hated most. He turned emotion into evidence. At a diner on the edge of town, Marcus met Raj Patel, a software engineer with a quiet anger and a laptop full of data. Raj didn't introduce himself like a hero. He introduced himself like someone who'd been paying fines for tulips and mailbox paint because arguing felt pointless. Raj showed Marcus a pattern. It wasn't random. Certain homes got hit again and again. Single parents. Older residents living alone. Families that didn't match the neighborhood's preferred look. A retired teacher named Betty Morrison joined them with a folder thick with photographs and violation notices. She spoke with the calm certainty of someone who'd spent decades recognizing bullying in every form. A firefighter named Tom Reeves added another piece. City contacts who said Brenda's violations were often creative interpretations, not actual municipal issues. It wasn't just Marcus. Willowbrook wasn't clean. It was quiet because people were scared. And Brenda kept driving through Snowman because the neighborhood let her. Marcus didn't decide to fight that night because he felt brave. He decided because Zoe was 8, and she was learning lessons about cruelty that no child should learn in their own front yard. He planned quietly. He measured. He tested. He built something that wouldn't harm anyone, but would expose everything. And he chose one thing as his anchor. If Brenda wanted to destroy a snowman again, she'd do it at dawn, in the same way she always did, with the same arrogance. Marcus let her keep believing she was unstoppable. Because the best trap was the one a bully walked into smiling. The neighborhood didn't organize like a rebellion at first. It organized like survivors. People talked in low voices. They stood too close to fences so their words wouldn't carry. They photographed notices and compared dates like they were tracing an illness. Brenda had trained Willowbrook to treat fear as normal. Betty's living room became a war room without anyone calling it that. Her coffee table filled with folders, printed photos, and calendars marked with delivery dates for violations. She didn't dramatize it. She simply laid it out, one piece at a time, until the pattern became undeniable. Raj took the emotional stories and turned them into numbers. He built spreadsheets that showed averages by household type. Single parents received violations at a rate that made random enforcement impossible. Elderly residents living alone were hit more than families with 2 adults. Houses with multiple cars in the driveway got inspected more often. Homes that looked expensive got left alone. Brenda didn't enforce rules. She curated the neighborhood. Tom kept his eyes on the official side. He knew how systems behaved when they were being abused, how they relied on people assuming they were permanent. His city contact confirmed what they suspected. Some of Brenda's warnings weren't backed by municipal code at all. They were intimidation dressed as authority. Marcus contributed what he did best: documentation. He logged every notice, every fine, every date and time. He cross-checked it with HOA language. He saved screenshots of Brenda's public posts about standards and discipline. He captured the difference between what she claimed and what the documents actually said. Then Betty found the piece that turned their anger into a countdown. She'd gone into county archives the way she used to grade essays, thoroughly, stubbornly, refusing to accept surface answers. There, buried in the neighborhood's original covenant from 1994, she discovered a clause most people never noticed because it sounded like a formality. A sunset clause. The HOA's authority ended after 30 years unless renewed by a supermajority. Betty didn't announce it dramatically. She laid the paper down, tapped the date, and let the room catch up. The expiration date had already passed. It wasn't a small mistake. It was the foundation cracking beneath Brenda's entire persona. If that clause meant what it said, Brenda wasn't enforcing anything. She was collecting money under authority she no longer had. Marcus felt the same sensation he got when he found a hidden wiring fault in a wall, part shock, part clarity. The reason Brenda escalated without fear was because she believed no one knew how to challenge her. She didn't just bully. She operated with certainty. That night, Marcus called an attorney and asked one question: what happens when someone collects fines under expired authority? The answer arrived without hesitation. It turned unfair into actionable. It turned bully into liability. Fraud. restitution, potential civil damages. Depending on how the fines were sent, maybe even bigger consequences. But there was a better move than exposing it immediately. If Brenda knew her power was dead, she would retreat. She'd stop sending notices. She'd call lawyers. She'd craft an excuse. She'd turn the situation into confusion and try to rewrite history before anyone could document the lie. So the neighbors chose the smarter option. They let Brenda keep talking. They let her keep issuing notices. Let her keep threatening foreclosure. Let her keep behaving like a queen who couldn't imagine her crown was already dust. Every day she acted under expired authority became another page in the evidence stack. Meanwhile, Marcus worked in his garage, not like a man plotting revenge, but like a contractor building a system with a purpose. He didn't want anyone hurt. He didn't want property damage. He wanted visibility, public, undeniable visibility that something was wrong, that the neighborhood saw it, and that Brenda's cruelty had consequences. He designed a triggered display that would happen the instant Brenda did what she always did. A simple pressure-activated mechanism buried beneath the snow, linked to irrigation lines and valves. It would spray a harmless, washable dyed water upward for seconds, long enough for cameras, short enough for safety. The point wasn't the water. The point was the moment. Brenda needed to be seen, not as an authority, but as a person committing an intentional act while the neighborhood watched. She'd been able to dismiss complaints because they sounded emotional. She couldn't dismiss video of herself using her car like a weapon against children's creations. And she couldn't dismiss the paperwork that followed. Marcus tested the system at night. He timed it to 30 seconds. He calculated angles so no one's windows would be hit. He chose a dye that would wash clean. The system didn't break laws. It didn't damage the car. It didn't attack anyone. It simply turned secrecy into daylight. At the same time, Raj dug into Pinnacle's business filings. The money thread kept showing up. He found connections between HOA fine revenue and management fees, connections that looked clean enough on the surface to pass as normal, until you compared how aggressively fines were being issued. A business model built on turnover started making sense. Pressure people financially. Make them sell. Flip the house. Repeat. And the more the group uncovered, the more they realized Brenda wasn't just cruel. She was useful to someone's profits. Zoe, meanwhile, kept building snowmen because children didn't understand politics. They understood hope. Marcus helped her build one more, placing it exactly where the system waited beneath the snow. He didn't tell her about the mechanism. He just told her they were making the safest snowman she'd ever built. Outside, Brenda's Mercedes kept doing its dawn patrol, like she was patrolling a conquered city. Inside, Willowbrook was preparing receipts. And everyone agreed on one thing. The final battle wouldn't happen in whispers or side conversations. It would happen in front of witnesses. It would happen before the renewal meeting. It would happen with cameras ready, paperwork printed, and Brenda's arrogance guiding her right into the spotlight. When people who live on control sense it slipping, they don't become reasonable. They become loud. Brenda's escalation arrived in waves. First, a batch of identical violations, aimed at anyone who had been seen talking to anyone else too long in a driveway. It was written like a warning from a regime. Organized resistance undermines community standards. It would have been laughable if it wasn't terrifying. Then came the safety patrol. A private security van began circling the neighborhood at dawn. The guards took photos like they were documenting a crime. They watched elderly residents walk to their mailboxes. They watched kids wait for buses. They treated normal life like suspicious activity. It was intimidation disguised as policy. The community stopped calling it annoying. They called it what it was, coercion. Marcus noticed a new pattern too. Brenda wasn't just fining anymore. She was trying to build a case. She wanted paperwork that could justify something bigger. One morning, a complaint appeared with the city about Marcus's work truck. Another appeared about his garage. Another about home business operations. It wasn't HOA language anymore. It was municipal-sounding language, designed to scare a contractor into losing his license. Raj traced the digital trail. The complaints didn't come from concerned neighbors. They came from Pinnacle's network. Brenda wasn't just swinging a hammer. She was coordinating. And when that still didn't break people, the next stage began: vandalism. Marcus woke to a broken window on his truck. Camera footage showed a figure moving with purpose, not panic. The next day, another neighbor reported slashed tires. Another found something poured into their gas tank. Another had a mailbox struck hard enough to tilt. These weren't kids. These were adult choices. The group met again, tighter, more serious. The evidence stack wasn't just HOA drama anymore. It was criminal behavior mixed into a pattern of discrimination and fraud. Tom pushed the strategy forward. He helped people file reports properly, the way first responders documented incidents: dates, times, photos, witness statements. No exaggerated language. No rage. Clean facts. Clean evidence. Betty crafted the narrative for the renewal meeting. Not an argument, a presentation. Not emotions, documentation. She built a timeline so clear that anyone could see the shift from enforcement to harassment to coercion. Meanwhile, Marcus's biggest risk sat inside his house: Zoe. Kids felt stress the way a house felt cold air through a crack. Zoe became quiet about snowmen, like building them was asking for punishment. Marcus saw that and understood something that fueled his resolve more than anger ever could. This wasn't about a snowman. It was about teaching a child whether bullies ran the world. Marcus helped Zoe build her final snow family the night before the deadline Brenda had set in her latest threat letter. It wasn't huge. It didn't block sidewalks. It didn't reduce sight lines. It was just visible enough to trigger Brenda's habit. Marcus positioned the snowman exactly where his buried plates waited. He checked the timer twice. He tested the cutoff. He set the camera angles for his own footage and quietly texted the neighbors: "Morning watch." Before dawn, lights flickered in houses like people waking for a storm. At 6:10 a.m., Brenda's Mercedes appeared on the street. It slowed, like it always did. It turned toward Marcus's driveway, like it always did. It accelerated, like it always did, because when bullies think they're invisible, they stop acting careful. The front tires rolled over the snow. The pressure plates triggered instantly. The display activated with precision. 8 jets of dyed water burst upward in a controlled arc, harmless but dramatic, turning the moment into an impossible thing to ignore. Brenda's Mercedes didn't get destroyed. It got revealed: her behavior, her intent, her ritual. The water shut off in seconds, exactly as designed. No damage. No ongoing spray. No threat to anyone. Just a perfect, undeniable visual. Brenda flung her door open, drenched, furious, humiliated in front of the neighborhood she'd ruled through fear. She looked around and realized something she hadn't considered for years. She wasn't alone with her power trip. She had witnesses. Phones were up. Cameras were rolling. Neighbors were outside, not hiding. Even people who had never spoken against her stood watching. Marcus stepped forward calmly, holding a folder that looked simple, but contained the death certificate of Brenda's authority. He didn't yell. He didn't gloat. He spoke like a man presenting facts. He explained that the HOA's authority had expired under its own documents. That every fine issued after the sunset date was legally void. That collecting money under expired authority wasn't enforcement. It was fraud. Brenda's face shifted from rage to confusion to panic. Then Tom's reporter arrived, because Tom had already arranged it. Not to sensationalize, but to ensure Brenda couldn't rewrite the story later. The deputy followed shortly after. Not to arrest over dyed water, but to review the documentation and confirm what the neighborhood had discovered. Brenda's threats of foreclosure were powerless intimidation, and her continued harassment under false authority could carry consequences. Brenda tried to regain control the only way she knew how: by threatening louder. It didn't work. Because her entire power had depended on one thing: that nobody would ever prove she was bluffing. Now the proof was in the air, on video, in public records, and in the calm posture of a man who had stopped reacting emotionally and started acting strategically. And Brenda's final mistake, the one she couldn't undo, was that she had kept building a paper trail while her authority was already dead. She had incriminated herself for months. And the neighborhood had been saving receipts the whole time. The renewal meeting didn't feel like a community gathering. It felt like a courtroom without the judge. The community center filled beyond capacity. Families who had avoided meetings for years arrived early. People brought folders. People brought printed screenshots. People who had once whispered in fear now spoke openly, because the spell had broken. Brenda didn't show up on time. When she finally arrived, she looked smaller. Not physically, emotionally. The confidence wasn't gone because she suddenly grew a conscience. It was gone because she understood the one thing bullies never survive: a room that stops flinching. Betty presented first. She didn't insult Brenda. She didn't call names. She did what teachers did when they wanted truth to land. She taught. She presented the covenant's sunset clause. She showed the expiration date. She explained renewal requirements. She demonstrated, calmly, that the HOA had been operating under expired authority. Then Raj presented the data. Not opinions. Not feelings. Numbers, charts, averages, and patterns. Selective enforcement against certain households, especially single parents and vulnerable residents. The room reacted the way people did when they saw the truth lined up too clearly to deny. Tom followed with evidence of intimidation tactics, security patrol photos, complaint filings, and documentation of how HOA enforcement had attempted to become city enforcement through coordinated false reports. Mrs. Cecilia stood last, holding her camera like a witness in a trial. She showed the photos of Brenda's repeated snowman destruction. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't dramatize. She simply let the room see what had been happening right in front of them. A grown adult using a vehicle to intentionally destroy children's creations as a display of dominance. The room changed after that. Because some people could excuse fines. Some people could excuse strictness. Almost nobody could excuse cruelty toward kids when it was shown clearly. The vote happened next. It wasn't close. The renewal failed decisively. The HOA dissolved the way a bad dream ended, suddenly, finally, and with a relief that felt physical. But dissolving the HOA wasn't the end. It was the beginning of consequences. The group's attorney filed for restitution of fines collected after the expiration date. The numbers were painful. Thousands per household. Tens of thousands collected under authority that didn't exist. Pinnacle Property Solutions tried to argue administrative confusion. That defense fell apart when the evidence showed Brenda and Derek profited from aggressive enforcement, and when the filing history showed they never disclosed conflicts clearly. Refunds came first. Then penalties. Then a settlement that changed lives for the families who had been forced to choose between groceries and violations. Marcus didn't become rich overnight. But he got something better. He got breathing room. He rebuilt Zoe's idea of home as a place that didn't punish joy. She drew chalk art without a timer. She built snowmen without fear. The neighborhood's kids built together again, not as a secret rebellion, but as normal childhood. The most satisfying part wasn't Brenda losing her position. It was Brenda losing her mask. Once the HOA dissolved, her authority became what it always was, a person trying to intimidate others into giving her what she wanted. Without the paperwork shield, she had nothing. Derek's stake in Pinnacle became a liability when other neighborhoods heard what happened and started checking their own covenants. Contracts were terminated. Complaints grew. Investigations followed. Brenda tried to save face by relocating to a community that valued standards. But the kind of person who needs power doesn't find peace in a new place. They find new targets, until someone else documents them the way. Willowbrook did. In Willowbrook, the neighbors created something simple in place of the old HOA, a voluntary association with transparent budgets and one rule that mattered more than grass height. No one gets to bully anyone here again. Marcus used part of the settlement to fund something small but meaningful, a neighborhood kids project day each winter. Hot chocolate tables, donation bins for gloves and scarves, and a snow sculpture contest where the only standard was creativity. The first year, Zoe built a snow family bigger than she'd ever dared. She used the purple scarf again, the same one she once thought she'd lost to cruelty. This time, it stayed. That night, Marcus watched the kids run between snow creations, laughing without checking for a Mercedes at dawn. He realized his biggest victory wasn't revenge. It was restoration. He hadn't taught Zoe that bullies always win. He had taught her that bullies only win when everyone stays quiet. And when Zoe asked if the mean lady would come back, Marcus didn't promise something unrealistic. He promised something true. If someone tries to hurt people again, the neighborhood knows what to do now. They document. They stand together. They vote. They end it. The story ended the way it needed to, not with one bully being humiliated, but with a community remembering it belonged to the people who lived there, not the person holding a clipboard. And on the next snow day, when Zoe finished her newest snowman and stepped back to admire it, she didn't look scared. She looked proud. Because this time, the neighborhood wasn't a place where joy needed permission. It was a place where joy was protected. The end.